All right. So here we are. I'm gonna start. Uh, I'm uh, I'm like just the host kind of person, and I'm gonna be taking questions and helping moderate a bit and giving the initial background. You can see the right screen, right? Other panelists? Okay, perfect. So Deepchecks, we're building continuous validation for LLMs and AI systems. We have a deep collaboration with AWS, and this is we're happy to have this joint event to show you not just about the collaboration, but also about and how that how you can use it, but also about a specific topic. So we're going to be talking about reliable agentic workflows. I think there are so many different definitions for like formal definitions for what's an agentic workflow. Hope to learn a bit, at least some about it in this event. But basically, what we're going to look at today is how to build and evaluate a multi-phase LLM app. Every time you touch it, there are so many topics you can sidetrack. So you can sidetrack to and learn about. But I think something that I'm starting to see, maybe a year ago, every time you talk to someone about what are you doing with LLMs, it was always RAG, 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 RAG. Now, RAG is probably still more common, but it's starting to be a lot more common when you see someone working on a multi-phase complex kind of task where you might have classification or routing at the beginning and so forth. And it's both hard to build. Sometimes it feels like there are shortcuts like things like LangChain or Llama Index and so forth that kind of help. But no matter what you do, it's really complicated to get to the point where it's in production. And we're going to talk today both about building it and about evaluating it, and also showing some tools and best practices. So let's take a step back and talk about deep checks. So the problems we solve at Deepchecks is standardization of performance metrics. When you have an app like this, there are many different aspects you can look at. So at Deepchecks, we have many different, you can call it agents, where each one looks at a specific aspect. We get them to align with business goals, and then to get them to work together to be able to adapt to business logic, human annotations, and so forth. That's all part of what we do. You'll see it in action hopefully today. Then we have scalability and LLM evaluation. So it's a problem. There's no test set basically in Gen AI. So one of the problems we're trying to solve at DeepChecks is to get as close as you can to that, to enable doing it at scale, not just for a few samples, but during dev, CI/CD, production monitoring. So at all the different phases to scale better. And there's this buzzword that used to exist for tabular data called data-driven decision making. So we're trying to enable doing that when the data is unstructured in the LLM context. So to create all the infra that's needed to have an opinionated approach towards comparing versions, pinpointing weaknesses, and kind of deciding when something's good enough to deploy. That's us a bit. You'll see this in action again. But how we uh, how we approach it is we have what we call a turnkey solution. So we try to get something. It does nothing's ever really 100% turnkey, but what we aspire to build at Deepchecks is an LLM evaluation framework that suits not only coders but both coders and what we call clickers. So folks that don't want to dive deep within Python, they already have something that pretty much works. It looks pretty good up front, but then you can always adapt it and improve it. So the idea is even if the backend is sophisticated, includes proprietary models that we're building and complex pipelines and so forth, the front end experience is kind of guiding you and opinionated, telling you what to do. That's a bit about us. Now, about a bit about what does AWS have to do with us? So, AWS announced something called the Partner AI Apps, which we're proud to be one of the first partners in. The idea is DeepChecks, everything you'll see today is available natively within SageMaker. What does that mean natively? It means you'll essentially not really feel that we're an external party. No data sent out. You don't even need like a contract with us. You just work directly with AWS and you'll get it within SageMaker. SageMaker is well known not just for LLMs, also for things like computer vision and tabular data, but they've been really doubling down on LLMs recently. And part of their effort is to bring in tools like ourselves to be able to build what we call the best in breed combination of different tools. So yeah, actually we'll do the survey a bit later. In the meantime, Nick, feel free to take over.
Thanks, Philip. Let me see if I can share my slides here. Oops. Let me know if you guys can see that. You guys able to see my screen? Okay, thank you. Just checking. Good morning, afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name's Nick. I'm a data scientist at AWS on the SageMaker go-to-market team. Um, so kicking it off here, let me see if I can just change slides. So as Philip mentioned, we're happy to announce the general availability of SageMaker AI partner apps, which was launched last year at reInvent. It supports a growing list of Gen AI and machine learning apps from industry partners such as Deepchecks. These apps are fully managed and run privately and securely in a SageMaker environment, and they're accessible from both SageMaker Studio as well as SageMaker Unified Studio. So, what are the benefits that these apps bring to customers? First, customers told us they want choices. They want to have access to a diverse set of best-in-class tooling and frameworks that are easily integrated with their workloads on SageMaker without having to switch back and forth between interfaces and systems. Secondly, while leveraging these apps, they want to make sure that their data remains secure and stays within the confines of the security boundaries. So these apps are deployed in your own VPC and data does not leave. And last but not least, achieving these benefits without having to have the overhead of deploying, managing, and scaling these apps themselves. So we talked about SageMaker AI apps and the customer benefits they bring, but how do these apps fit into the customer journey and their AI workflows and life cycles? Let's look at a typical AI machine learning workflow, starting from data prep to foundational model selection from hubs, model evaluation and customization, and lastly, deploying and monitoring. We can see where Deepchecks complements SageMaker AI. Deepchecks provides the ability to prepare your own golden data set. They help you evaluate models and applications and also bring tracing and monitoring. We'll talk a little bit more about that later with Shir, who's going to show a demo. So let's talk about how to get started with the apps. So there's two key personas. First is the platform admin. They're the ones who are responsible for discovering and having the permissions to subscribe and provision these apps for other team members. And the other persona is the end users. Once the apps are provisioned by the admins, they can be readily used within the SageMaker environment. So getting started, what does it look like? So as you can see here, there's three screenshots. On the left, we have the SageMaker console. In the middle, we have the SageMaker Unified Studio. And on the right, we have SageMaker Studio. So very quickly to highlight the journey of a platform admin, they'll start off in the console. They can browse the details of the apps, the contractual and infrastructure pricing, and then they can go to the AWS Marketplace to subscribe. Once the app is subscribed, then the admin can provision and deploy the app for use. And then for end users, once the apps are provisioned by the admins, they can see the apps from either the SageMaker Studio or the Unified Studio and begin to use them. So it's that simple. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Surya, who's going to show you a demo of agents within SageMaker AI.
Amazing. 1 second before we go to Surya, let's have our first poll. Uh, so I'm launching the first poll and I'll read it out loud here. We're asking you, what's the stage of the current LLM agent in your organization? Conceptualization and design. When I say agent, it could be any app, but just simplistically, development and testing, production and deployment, or optimization and scaling. So, Suri, I'll let you start, and I'll share the results in a bit.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Surya Kari. I am a senior data scientist on the SageMaker WWSO team at AWS. And we're going to be seeing a demo of agents. I mean, there's a lot of talk about agents and how they're going to change the world. But we're going to see an agent that does a very specific, very simple thing. And we're also going to see how we can connect an agent that you build within SageMaker um, and connect it back to Deepchecks, which is an partner app with AWS, and how easy it is. And uh, then Cher can take over and she can kind of tell you all the amazing things you can kind of evaluate and monitor with Deepchecks. Um, we're going to see how to build an agent that does three different things in a single workflow. The first thing it does is it runs off to the internet. There's one agent that runs off to the internet and gets data about a particular stock. And then another agent essentially uses DeepSeek, and it essentially goes and does reasoning on that data. It creates a report, and then it feeds that back to another agent that essentially takes that data and then creates a very structured PDF report that any hedge fund can use. And this has things like what kind of risks you could see, what kind of around the corner issues that you might find within that stock. So essentially, it helps uh, a hedge fund or a financial company make a decision about should I invest in a stock or not, right? And it creates a very detailed report on if they should or not. So
Wait,
first things first.
sorry,
Sorry.
one second before you dive back in, I'll share the results of the poll.
Mhm.
Uh, So we have here 42% in conceptualization and design, 36% development and testing, 19% production and deployment, and only 3% in optimization and scaling. By the way, these results are actually a little shifted towards early phases than what I usually see. Could be because folks perceive agent less than a regular LLM based app, which is what we usually ask, but it's good to see this, and I'm also glad to see that already like almost 20% are actually productionizing it. Of course, there's a bias towards folks that join this
Mhm.
event. Anyway,
Awesome. Um, so the way you connect to a partner app within AWS is you have a partner app ARN that the SageMaker um, console kind of generates. Then you can actually see it here if you want. So you have an ARN here, you have an SDK URL that you essentially put it here. So you have a URL, you have a partner app ARN, and then you have a Deepchecks API that the Deepchecks um, the Deepchecks software kind of gives us, and then you integrate it into your code, and that's about it. And then you essentially create an app name, you create a client, and then you create an application. So Cher is going to walk you through most of this UI. I just wanted to showcase what it looks like. You could do evals, you could look at production monitoring as well. So um, moving on from this, for an agent within SageMaker, you can kind of integrate Hugging Face. You can download Hugging Face models and then deploy them to an endpoint, and you can use them as LLMs within an agent, and we're going to see that. I blanked out this uh, DeepSeek deployment code essentially because we've already gotten one deployed. There are several ways in which you can deploy models within SageMaker. You have SageMaker Jumpstart, which is essentially prepackaged recipes that all you have to do is run, and it creates these endpoints that you can use. Or if you have a model that you've never seen, Hugging Face has created this amazing new model, or any other model weights that you have, you can essentially take that, containerize it, and then use one of our Hugging Face estimators to essentially do inference on it once you deploy it. Um, and then we move on, right? So you have a world in which you have the LLMs, you have the endpoints created. Now I'm going to walk you through how we created the agents and what is important for agents and how agents can be thought of and how tasks can be thought of, how tools can be thought of. So agents comprise of three very important things, right? So the agents have a role, agents have a goal, and agents have a backstory. Just like how a human, let me actually go to that code. Agents have a role, goal, and a backstory, right? So just like a human that has been employed at a company would have a particular role, just like, hey, I'm a data scientist. My goal is to create data science artifacts, and my backstory is I have experience building data science artifacts. That's my backstory, right? That's how you should think about an agent as well. It has a role, goal, and a backstory. And you could see that each of our agents have those, right? So you have our agent that does data collection. It says you're a stock data collector. The agent that does financial analysis, it says, hey, you are a financial analysis bot. And the agent that creates the report says, hey, you are a hedge fund report writer, right? So all of them have that experience built in. So the backstory is really important. Um, and then we come to the tasks. So once you are employed at a company, you have a bunch of tasks to finish. Um, each of these tasks are very, very focused. So you could see here for the bot that is getting the data, it says, hey, go and fetch that stock. That is your task, right? For the bot that is analyzing stock, it says, hey, you are a structured financial analyst, and all you want to do is you create structured financial analysis, including risk assessment and investment potential, right? So that's very important because we're going to see the reports, and it has that risk assessment and investment potential, right? Because that's very important for this hedge fund company. The last one essentially says,
Sorry, just 1 second. Two questions you got. You can answer them now or later, but one of them is why SageMaker and not Bedrock? If I'm building my agents at a custom platform, how can I integrate deep checks? So that's all one question. Question number two is if this code will be available somewhere.
yes. So we have a blog that we will share at the end of this session. That blog has very similar code. This code is essentially something we demoed at a conference just last week, but very similar code. We'll link that at the end of the session. Why not Bedrock? Well, in this case, what I did forget to mention was we have a Bedrock based LLM. So we have Bedrock Nova models integrated into two of the agents. And then we have a SageMaker based model that's integrated into the financial analysis bot. So it really depends on what your use cases are. Uh, if you have a use case where um, you want to get started really quickly, and in a serverless manner, Bedrock is great. If you have models that you want you want to deploy yourself and you manage all these models, but you have very specific requirements from those models, SageMaker is really good. Um, the way you build with Bedrock and SageMaker is also a bit different. With Bedrock, you build by tokens. With SageMaker, you build by inference. So it really depends on how your use case is structured. And there's an entire ecosystem of literature out there on when and why you should use Bedrock. That would be out of topic for this particular presentation, but the long and short is you really need to understand what your use cases are based on that you can use either Bedrock or SageMaker. Um,
All right, just one last part of that question I'll address. There was a question of if building the agent at a custom platform, how can I integrate deep checks? So what we're focusing on today is if it's within SageMaker or if it's with the AWS environment, then you can deploy deep checks via SageMaker. There's also a SaaS deployment. There are on-prem deployments. So with any platform, pretty much we can give some sort of support. But today we want to highlight on this new integration, which enables us to be available within SageMaker.
mhm. So I'll go back to where I was just before I answer the questions, right? So um, you can absolutely use Bedrock within SageMaker. So in this case, you could see we kind of created three Bedrock Nova models here. We initialized them, and you can use them as agent LLMs, no problem. Um, and then the tasks are very defined, focused set of um, things that an agent should accomplish. And you could see that each of the agents has this very specific task, right? And then once you have those tasks defined, once you have those agents defined, one thing you have to look at is we also have something called tools. Tools are an entire topic in themselves, but we created our own tools here. So we have a PDF report writing tool. We have an investment report PDF generator tool. We have a Yahoo Finance tool. Essentially, all of these tools are given to the agents. An agent can have multiple tools at its disposal. And where the LLM comes in is what tool should I use for a particular task, because that's where the LLM really is required. That's what it is used to make decisions on. So imagine we only have one tool here, but imagine you have hundreds of tools available for an agent, and you have a really powerful LLM making that decisions on the fly, right? Um, so once you have these agents created, once you have these tools created, once you have these tasks defined, all you have to do is put them together, um, into a team. And imagine, again, agents, imagine them as humans. You create teams of humans working on a particular goal. So the goal here is the prompt that you give to the entire crew. The individual tasks are essentially that goal is kind of, it's broken up into individual tasks, and each task is given to a particular agent, right? And then we put them into a sequential flow here, but there's an entire topic of discussion on how these agents can be orchestrated. You can have agents in a hierarchical method, where in a normal office we have a manager, we have managerial agents, and these managerial agents kind of break these tasks down and then assign those tasks to worker agents. And these manager agents then report up to other agents, which are orchestrator agents. So you can imagine agents as an entire office structure. Um, and that's pretty much how you think about agents, right? And then the way you orchestrate them depends on how complicated your entire agentic architecture is. And then
All
you
right.
kick it off,
Yep.
right?
So yeah, as expected, I did warn you in advance. We're getting a lot of questions, so I'll take you through some of them each time. I'll take another batch and then let you continue with the flow. So,
Yeah, yeah.
question number one, I think I'll answer question number one. What if you want to use Bedrock model endpoint? I want to evaluate it with deep checks. Would the partner app help there? So the answer is yes, and even in this demo it appears. I don't know if you noticed, but some of the agents here are using Bedrock, some are using SageMaker. It still works. The big the SageMaker is just a technical way to set it up, but what's really special about it is it stays within the AWS account. So yes, that's definitely it's even one of the default use cases. Uh, that's one that we answered. Then there's another question about is crew and agent builder like Bedrock agents? Tools are the equivalent of action groups. So that was by Rami G. I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so Bedrock agents are AWS's own implementation of agents. They differ a bit more. They differ a bit from open source implement. And every company that is orchestrating agentic frameworks thinks about frameworks or thinks about agents differently. You should definitely look at Bedrock agents. Bedrock agents natively integrate into all of AWS's services. Bedrock agents also have access to um, really great Bedrock based services as well. And again, you have to think about your own use case before you look at what agentic framework you want to use. The best thing about SageMaker is SageMaker allows you the ability to use frameworks from around the open source community. There's a lot of great frameworks coming out of the open source community as well, and open source moves a lot faster than a lot of us here. So if there is a capability that open source has come out with that is not currently available with, say, some of our other services, you can absolutely use SageMaker to get that to bring that capability in. Um, if you want to get started really quickly with agents, you should absolutely go and look at Bedrock. Bedrock's got some really phenomenal implementation of agents. What we are just using here is an open source agentic framework. There's no right or wrong answer here.
All right, amazing. We still have another few, so I'll give you just another couple and then we'll
Is
keep on.
it all right if I just run this?
Yeah, of course.
So in this case, we're just asking this crew to say, hey, tell me if I should invest in Microsoft or not. We're going to kick that off, and then I'm going to answer some questions because it's going to take its time.
All right, amazing. Perfect timing. And I'd like to, you don't use the term data scientist as commonly anymore. We like to say the main job of a data scientist is to wait, right? You have to know when to wait and what to do while you're waiting. All
So
right,
we
so
kick off and go to sleep.
exactly. Uh, so Rob is asking two different questions. One of them, if there's a demo of SageMaker, we can see the agents in action somewhere. Maybe Nick, if you have one, maybe there's a link you can send. I don't, but that's one question. And another is if we have one-to-one mapping for agents and tasks, or there could be one agent performing multiple tasks.
Um, One agent performing multiple tasks. You can assign the same agent multiple tasks. For example, here, if you see here, the same task can be assigned to multiple agents. That is entirely possible, but the way you think about it is, would you in a company like to have multiple roles assigned to you? That's a whole other story. Because the idea of an agent is to break down tasks to a point where it is hyper focused. It does one very specific thing really well. So the broader the task is, um, the less focused it becomes, and that means its work suffers a bit. At least this is not data that we have metrics on, but essentially there is consensus on the fact that the more focused an agent is on a task, the better it performs. Um, but it really is down to what your use case really wants. Again, I'll go back to that tried and tested fallback that I have.
Sure,
Everything will, I mean,
but
depends on you.
if I'll echo, sorry, yeah, but a bit stronger, I'll say even if it's possible, don't do it. Like probably better to separate. But okay.
Because when you're trying to when you I think the problem becomes when you're trying to evaluate your agents, it becomes a murkier proposition because you want to understand if the agent is doing a particular task really well. Now, if you're having multiple tasks being done by the same agent, you will see that it doesn't do well on most of those tasks.
All right. Now, maybe last one. There were a couple of questions about deep checks, what deep checks offers in terms of evaluation metrics and so forth. For that part, please wait for Shield's part. You'll see it in a lot more detail. There was another question if we support images as part of it. So when there's a workflow that has images as part of the workflow, then there are definitely stuff that can be done. You're not going to see it in the demo today, but we also have an open source that focuses on images specifically for that. So there are interesting stuff we do in the field of images, but our flagship product is LLM evaluation. Our focus is LLMs. So what you'll see in Shield's demo is definitely the core and the main focus that we're working on. All right.
And I'm almost so I'm gonna give it off to share in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, there are more questions, but I don't want to take too long break. So sorry, I take it back, and when we need another breather, then we'll go to the next questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to showcase what the agentic workflow has done. So you could see that it went and got Microsoft's data from Yahoo Finance. The financial analysis bot essentially took that data and then created a structured financial analysis. Um, and then the hedge fund report writer essentially took that and then created a report. It also creates a PDF. It should be here. So you see 2 minutes ago, it created this PDF report. It says, oh, here's an overview, here's the valuation metrics, here's the dividend yield. But if you remember, it says, I also want the investment potential and the valuation risk in the task, and which I said is really important because that's what you really want to see. So you'll see that the agent has said, hey, there's a high PE ratio, which might indicate that Microsoft's a bit overvalued. Sorry, I should have chosen Amazon. This is a bad thing to choose, especially because I'm from Amazon. But um, this is by no means any ding on anybody. It's just this is what the report says. Um, Microsoft IP ratio, you may want to indicate that it is overvalued. So, you know, just the dividend is a bit modest, but it supports future growth. So you should really go in and invest in Microsoft, right? So this is what something like a hedge fund would want to understand. And you've completely automated that procedure now. Obviously, it's not as detailed as say if I were a hedge fund report. Sorry, if I were a hedge fund, I would not use this because the name of us is Catastrophic Capital. So please do not use it. The end of the agent demonstration, I will then give it off to Cher, who's going to talk about deep checks and what kind of metrics you can track. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, wait. So maybe you should take another couple of questions, and I think anyone else
Yeah,
here
absolutely.
can chime into
Absolutely.
some of them. So I see Nick's already answering some of them by text, so I'll take that away. So a question we got from Zahi. Very general question, probably. What makes it an agent anyway? If everything this agent does is translate the specific calls to LLM. I have
Yeah,
a,
so
I have a
think about agents as microservices with a brain, right? You're right. I mean, agents are nothing but function calls, but remember that agents also have the ability to think based on what kind of requests you have for the agent, right? For example, you have an LLM attached to an agent, and you have a bunch of tools and tasks assigned, a bunch of tools assigned to an agent. The difference between a function and a microservice versus an agent is the agent, based on the prompt or the task it is given, looks at the description of the tasks and then makes a decision on which tools to use, how many times to use that tool. For example, if it uses a tool and then it says, I didn't get all of the data I want, I'm going to reuse that tool. So imagine with a function, you'll have to write your own while loop. But with an agent, it generates its own while loop until it is satisfied with the outcome. So that is the difference between an agent and a function and a microservice. Because you then think about it as a router with connections to several tools, and the router is essentially an LLM agent that is making decisions on what tools to use. That's the difference.
All right, maybe I'll add just one comment. I thought about this a lot actually. I think, when there are they say that what is it, the Intuit, or folks that are in we deal a lot with snow, that are like living in snow places. So they have like 100 names for snow, and I think in Hebrew there are like 70 different names for God, or like, so when you're dealing a lot with within a field, and a lot of times there's deeper terminology. So in the beginning they called it LLM based application. But then wait, there could be multiple calls. They said there are many different calls, and then that assumes the calls are all sequential. So once you could have calls that are not sequential, there can be voting and this and that. Then agent is also a shorter word, right? LLM based application is very like long, and it also means something that could have many agents. It's just more efficient to use the term. But I think it's because it's both shorter and more well defined. I think the term agent, which doesn't mean the whole app, it's just like one LLM call that happens again and again with a pretty well defined prompt. I think that's gonna conquer the world in terms of terminology, because it's not that different than what existed before when people said LLM based app, but meant like a very simple app. But why use a longer word to describe something that's meaning kind of changed? So I think we're gonna see this word used again and again, and for not like for the stupidest reasons in the world, even though in many cases it's the same thing. All right. So maybe I'm not sure which questions are still open. So let's do one more question by Amit Gupta, and then I'll see what else isn't closed. So how can I use agents to call third-party APIs, COTS or SAS, to get the data sets stored in their storages?
Um, well, I mean, you've seen that we already had used a third-party API, which is Yahoo Finance. The tool itself had the ability to call the third-party API. So agents can actually call third-party APIs through tools. You have the ability to do agentic RAG. If you want to understand things like, hey, I want to get data from a storage, you can do agentic RAG, or you can use an API to get data from another storage that you have. It is entirely possible to do that. In fact, you just saw that we could do it with Yahoo API. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Amazing. All right. So quick intermediate clapping for Surya, and let's move over to Shield. Surya, feel free to go over the questions both in the. It's better to ask in Q&A, by the way, for folks that are asking questions, than in the regular chat. But a lot of questions were asked in the chat, so feel free to go over and see if you have anything to add while we're talking. And maybe Surya and Nick, feel free to add your emails there also, and Shiv and I will also add our emails if anyone wants to contact us.
Awesome, cool. So hi everyone. So kind of continuing or directly continuing Surya's talk about well, agents, we're going to now step over to the part of evaluation, both in general and agentic. So briefly, I'm Shir, CTO of Deepchecks. Sometimes I have a whole slide about myself, a bit of a background, many years as a data science researcher and managing data science, and today evaluating AI-based applications. And yeah, I'll save the different sports that I like to do, but I will mention that tomorrow, in less than 12 hours, I will be starting a half marathon. So that's kind of my next exciting thing after this webinar. Welcome to come join me. Cool. So I'm taking a step back 1 second to talk a bit about evaluation, and then we'll connect it to agents, and we'll see hands-on both evaluation in general and also with a focus on the agentic side. So when we talk about evaluation, we see well, there's like quite a lot of examples out there just popping up more and more, and every time each of us talks with some type of LLM based applications, chat, etc. So yeah, I mean, I always like looking at examples because they're quite amusing. Like that it's if you have darker skin, you can actually stare more time at the sun, and it's healthier, and you can also train 8 days a week. And of course, these have implications. And I think it's even more interesting because when the more we go autonomous, right? And this is like the agentic part of being able to do the tool use, the planning, decide according to the actions, then of course the implications of our actions are even better, or even more impactful. So then it's not only that the airline has to pay for the for the $1 ticket that it promised, but maybe the ticket was already booked in the system. So that's kind of the why I see it as a even more major step. So when we look at evaluation, we see two main things. One is what is the data set we're evaluating on. So this is mainly when we're kind of iterating between, trying to improve, before there was a question about what happens if I change the to a cheaper model without affecting performance. So if you have one data set which is like high quality, preferably also like annotated, the ground truths, then that can really help understanding how much would the performance, for example, be impacted. Of course, we need the different metrics, or in Deepchecks language, we call them different properties that we evaluate in order to estimate our performance. And a systematic approach is because when we look at company like customers we work with, so usually when you're developing like your first LLM based application, you look at it manually, maybe you do some whether it's manual inspection and manual annotation, some vibe checks, etc. And you're like, okay, you understand more or less. But when you want to have multiple apps, when you want to improve them, when you want to deploy it to production, if you don't have something that really enables to like properly iterate and improve, then that's where it becomes a bit more troubling. So what is our overall recommendation or approach for evaluation? Basically, we look at, first of all, understanding which metrics you want are relevant. Whether it's, if I'm in RAG, I really care about the LLM not answering things that are not inside its context. If I don't know, have restrictions, like I want to verify that there's no PII. I want to verify that it's a complete answer, that it's not answering off topic, etc. So I have quite a lot of metrics. They tend to vary a bit between different applications, but like application types, but not completely, right? Because I do always want to verify that it answers completely, but then sometimes it's also critical that it answers in the right format, etc. So it really depends a bit on the use case, and usually there's quite a lot of metrics. Therefore, we really believe in aggregating all of these into one overall metrics, and we'll see in a sec an example like of how this is done. And then repeating it, allowing you to, automatically, whether it's incorporating it in your CI/CD or when you want to compare between a few different versions, and we'll see the examples in a sec. So just to explain the part of what does it mean to aggregate, or what are all these metrics. So I'll show you one example, which is from a specific kind of a case study in a healthcare related domain. And here, one part of the project was basically extracting data from unstructured data. So in this case, we had like a PDFs which were later used eventually for research. But the idea is that the users will be able to ask different questions about the PDF, get the relevant links, know which PDF related to which type of, in this case, it's something in the healthcare field. So which type of medical condition, what's the source, etc. So what you can see here is like, this is kind of demonstrating each of the properties And in this case, we have the overall thing is like, is the answer available? Like given the user's query, did we get an answer? And if we didn't get an answer, then we go and ask, can the answer be found in the PDF? Because if it can be found, then of course that's not a good LLM behavior. But if we didn't get an answer, so like we have a property called avoided answer, but the answer cannot be found in the PDF, then that's actually good, right? Because we don't want it to hallucinate. And then on the other hand, if the answer is available, but it can't be found in the PDF, then of course that's also not good. So what you can see here is essentially we have quite a few metrics, whether it's avoided answer, whether it's can it be found in the retrieved document? So this is relating to the retrieval relevance. Does it contain hallucinations? How is the quality? Is it complete? And in each of these, eventually we take lots of different metrics, and we have in Deep, so we have like an opinionated one, which is very customizable to help you put this all together to have eventually an aggregated metric, basically enabling you to officially like iterate, compare, kind of use it in CI/CD and also monitor in production. And we'll see it in the system in a sec. Now, before we talk a bit about agentic evaluation. So actually, we're going to see a workflow. I think generally when we talk about agents, and I'll just mention here in the notes because we saw an elaborate example. We have a very similar example, which we'll see soon in the system. So I'd say one of the main differences of agents, except from them, autonomously used like doing different actions, and many times also iteratively so. So like in this case, we have a user asking something, a query planner of deciding like, okay, what are the, breaking it down into different components and what should actually be done also as part of the flow. And we have different tools to retrieve data and to answer in this case, it's a customer support. Also, many times we will have, we'll go back to the planning phase in order to really have this as like a ongoing kind of case resolution. So the whole idea of not only deciding which functions to call and calling them, but then also continuing to planning and improve, that is, I think, the part that kind of takes it to the next level and also has some complexity in making it work properly. So we saw before a few examples about, challenges in general LLM, like the ways they work. And well, luckily, when we come to evaluating agents, I search for various like public, very, known failures. And well, all's good. So maybe we can just kind of finish here. Well, at least there weren't any, I didn't find any very, very prominent, a total failures that were published by it. But any of us that did actually try to use agents, of course, saw that, first of all, they're not that widely adopted in production as, let's say more a classic LLM-based Q&A use cases, summarization, etc. And the main thing is it is very complex to evaluate them, and therefore one way is kind of, to hope that everything will be okay. That's not the recommended way in our approach. I'll say a few things about evaluating the agents themselves, which are quite similar to our overall approach to evaluating LLM-based application, and that is to break it down into the different components, to really dive into each one of them, find the failures, and then kind of look at it together. So the main things that we find, like at Deepchecks, that we identify that are special for agents are, first of all, there is the overall kind of notion of, are they advancing towards their goal? So like, is the goal nearing completion? Is the actions that they're doing advancing towards there, and that there are no unnecessary actions as well. So like if we look at this example where a user wants to, get the price of some thermostat, they probably won't be that happy if not only do they get the info about their thermostat, but it's also already in their shopping cart, okay? So unnecessary actions can sometimes have a, problem due to maybe information that you don't want, actions that you don't want, or just user satisfaction. This is also very, very related to the tools themselves. So were the correct tools selected? Were redundant tools also selected? And when we look at the tools themselves, were they run properly? So were their input the relevant arguments? Did their outputs come back properly? Like, were there any errors? When the tools themselves ran? And the last component that we see is basically all of the regular, I would say, evaluation properties, whether it's, completeness of the overall steps, things like hallucination detection with, like we have the grounded context property that helps find that, different bad behaviors that we want to happen, etc. So basically, it is as we see it, it's like adding another type of properties, and also looking at it at the multi-phase approach, which it is. So this was a kind of a quick demo to quick intro to evaluation and specifically to agent evaluation. I'll now jump in to show both of these in the system. If there are any questions before Philip, then I think now is a good time, and if not, I'll jump into the system.
Yeah, you have a couple of questions. One of them is, how do you get these metrics? Is it manual work? So I think that you'll see within the demo. That's for Bram. So let's wait with that. And then the other one is the evaluation cover, context, syntax, content, ethics. I think again for that, that's from a Kansha. I think you'll get a feel for that through the demo. So again, for both of those questions, it's not that we didn't notice them. I just didn't bring them up because I knew that you'd see them soon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great question. I think also the metrics are significant part of the evaluation. Yeah, okay. So we'll start with trying to get rid of this. Cool. So we'll start with overall, just like maybe to start with a simpler example of evaluating. In this case, it's like a simple RAG application. Okay. So what you see here are the different properties that I mentioned. For example, grounded in context, avoided answer, etc. And the overall use case in this case is question answering. So we have the users with different questions, in this case, in the healthcare domain about a specific medical condition. And what we see is the chatbot's answer after a RAG process. So we have here some information retrieval, etc. Now, what we can see is in this case, there were like two versions. Okay, so initial version with a score of 65%. This score in this case, by the way, was manually annotated. Okay, so if I go here and I can show you the data, so there are some manual annotations. However, then what the user did was basically understand that they have to improve. There was some irrelevant context, avoided answers because the context was either not existing or it wasn't retrieved properly. So the prompt was improved, the knowledge base was expanded, and then came up V2. Now, what we can see in V2 is, first of all, that you can see here that these are like a hollow. So this annotation is the overall aggregate score after aggregation. Okay, so after aggregating the different properties, which I'll dive into in a bit. And this is, of course, customizable and also per use case. So for a Q&A use case, it's a bit different than a summarization one. So in this example, we can see what we saw before is that, like in this case, V2 improved greatly over V1. We can see both the grounded and context. So this is like the finding whether the output is actually grounded in the input is improving, completeness, etc. And we can also really go and dive in and see like the places where now it's thumbs up, but before it's thumbs down for various reasons. Okay, so we can go and really explore. And to show a bit about the properties themselves, so Deepchecks has a lot of like built-in properties. Okay, so these are all out of the box, mainly smaller language models, functions, etc. Like avoided answer, grounded in context, PII, etc. So those just come in and you can decide whether you want to add them or not, whether you want to incorporate them in the automatic annotation and so forth. We also support user-provided values. So I can add various like metadata, in this case is what the user is asking about, and also user customized prompts for LLM properties. So in this case, like we have completeness. Of course, again, this is also very task specific. Okay, so if I show in a different example, I may have like attractiveness, like how appealing is a text to a customer, and I can also add any, I can use from any of the like template bank, and I can add my own LLM base. So these are like LLM as a judge properties, and they all come together for the overall evaluation. So when we come back to the kind of looking at it as a whole, so maybe to show a bit of the properties. So if I, for example, search for grounded in context, right, I can go ahead and see like, here are a few examples where I got a low grounded in context score. Why? I also get some built-in explainability of, okay, these are the chunks that are the least grounded. So I would go ahead and show you how come they're not grounded, but the thing is that it means that this data just doesn't appear in the information retrieval, right? So it's a bit hard to like, the only way to see it's not grounded is to actually search for it, and you'll see that you won't find any reference in the retrieved documents. And we have similar explainability for different types of properties, right? Whether it's like completeness, which is based on a prompt. So we have here the explainability, and we'll see this also in the agentic demo. So maybe just before I like show the few examples on the agent flow. So the overall idea is that I have per use case, I have quite a few properties out of the box. I then would probably want to go ahead and choose the relevant ones, potentially add a few of my own, whether it's custom, like, values that I have, whether it's LLM based things that are like relevant to my domain, for example, or that I want to put an emphasis on. And then I can go ahead and change things and get automatic, properties and automatic overall annotations and see also various insights and so forth. So this is like the flow. If I show, by the way, similarly, like, so here we saw in Q&A before I showed just like one example of, so here what we have is some e-commerce like extraction so we have some scraping and then like extraction of data about different products. And something nice that you can really see here in the flow was that there was some base version, which was like nice, but it was quite dull and it got quite low scores, 33% by the user. Then the prompt was significantly changed to have a much more attractive prompt. And then we can see the score really improved. However, the groundedness and the coverage were not as good because it went very much towards like the text quality. Okay, so we got very high text quality, but not as good grounded in coverage. And eventually the user decided to go and do some balance between them. So like maybe go a bit lower on the attractiveness, right? So if I can go and if I'll search here like attractiveness property, I'll see that probably the attractiveness is highest for the attractive version and not as high for the balanced version, but the overall score is much better. And this eventually was the version that was chosen for production. Talking about production, we also allow, once you have the system configured, right? So you have the overall score.
Just 1 second. I will say we have quite a few questions. I'm letting Sheil go through the whole flow, and only then I'll take up the questions. But Sheil,
Okay,
please.
so
I'll take a
skip.
minute to save time for them.
Right. Okay, so basically we see also the behavior over time in production. And because we have a few questions, I'll just go ahead and jump into the agent evaluation. So, okay, so I talked a bit before about the demo, about the structure, right? So for the agentic flow, I'm in production, and this, as you know, many agents are not yet in production. So this agent is still in evaluation. Okay, so what do we have here? We have like I'll take okay, as an example. So we have user question and answer. Okay, in this case, by the way, it's a few questions. So like, I recently purchased a GPU in your store. The GPU overheats. I came today to return it, but the shop is closed. When can I come? Okay. So we have here the query planner, right? Given the input, what are the different things? We have here some tool choice. So it gets the user's info. Then given the user's info, so for example, here we see the user's info. Given the user's info, it then chooses to do tool choice and choose shop info and product info. Given all of that, it then eventually builds the whole output, okay? So it got like the user's info, it got the shop info, the product info. And in this case, we see like a really good example of, okay, cool. So this is the shop, here are the details. Here's some more information about your product because it knows what product it bought and all of that. And if we look at the next example, we can see that this one, for example, it's asking for all the warranty details and troubleshooting guides for all of the products. And here we see a thumbs down. So this thumbs down in this case is due to bad grounded in context. Okay, so we have here some hallucinations. So we can suspect that maybe, I don't know, maybe some info was missing, right? So it was like trying to answer, but then it was in this case hallucinating. Also complete this is like it's like medium. And then if we actually go back in here, we can see we can have a look at, the whole flow. So we get the get shop info. Okay, that's cool. So it brings okay, so it brings what's the warranty details, and I need troubleshooting guide. Okay, so we get the get shop info, get user info, which is not necessarily relevant for getting the all of the data about the different products, and for the get product info, so it did actually choose it properly. Okay, so we get the get product info for the various stuff. However, not all of the information actually came back. So as you can see, it's a bit more complex to like understand, okay, sometimes some of the steps are okay, but the others are not. And overall, it's like bad. And that, and I do want to finish so we can dive into, like, I can talk probably quite a lot more also about agents, but the idea is that you look at each step by itself. You have relevant properties such as tool selection that evaluating the tool selection that I mentioned before, and you have a look at the overall to find, again, the thumbs up and thumbs down of your system, or the places where it avoided answering, and is that good or not? I don't know, but it's something that you should be aware given the context. Probably, given the question, you can know. So, like, I don't know, is there a construction site in my area? If you don't have guardrails and it's answering with a shop info, then that's probably not a good example. So this is a bit kind of taking the evaluation to the agentic flow, and I'll stop the screen share. And cool. And if there's any more questions, I'll be happy to stay a few more minutes.
Great. I think we're gonna want to finish now, like within the minute, but maybe give one more question to go through. First of all, recording is hopefully going to be available. Can never promise, but that's the plan. And one more question is which metrics are specifically evaluating an agentic response? These are similar to to the LLM eval metrics, which are regular. So I know that was asked earlier on, but let's maybe say something about it and skip it for now.
Which are specific, or
which metrics are specific for agents? There's also a few more questions about how the scores are calculated and so forth. So if you could say something about that.
Right. So I'll say that the agentic specific properties are about tools, like evaluating the tool selection. So was the correct tool selected, yes or not? Checking the inputs and outputs, and checking about redundant steps. So those are like these are related to agentic flow towards the goal. I will say that many of the problems in agentic flows are actually in the kind of general metrics. Only you have to be able to support an agentic flow to actually identify them throughout the way. So that's my answer to that.
All right, great. I'll answer really, really quick, just a few ones. So not all of them, the ones that I think are fast, and the other ones, feel free to reach out. I put our emails all in the comments. How is the completeness of an answer evaluated? It's a lot. We do a lot of work on that. We do use an LLM for completeness. That's at least part of what's done. You basically try to look at it as self-contained as an answer, if it's complete or not. As Deepchecks determining if the answer is correct automatically or using feedback. So the idea is it's automatic. You have configuration, but then it's automatic. And then you can also compare it to user feedback that you're getting. And then we have I think one more question. In the case where the LLM is fine-tuned on a very domain-specific knowledge base, how would that be tested and evaluated? So the idea is the data set has to be very, very representative. There's a lot of work there. And then you do all the magic that Shil showed. So that's it for the very, very quick question answering. We can definitely do dedicated sessions. We do sometimes dedicated workshops for a specific company. And any other questions you can also send by LinkedIn, by mail. And we're not very hard folks to find. Thank you so much to the AWS team for joining us on this one. It was a pleasure working on you on the new integration we have with SageMaker, and also specifically on this demonstration. So thanks, Nick. Thanks, Surya. Shil, pleasure working with you on the day-to-day, but thanks for this as well. And for everyone else, speak to you soon, and speak to you at next events. We're also going to be at the GTC conference in a few weeks, and at the HIMSS conference next week, if anyone happens to be around. So we'll be in touch, and have a great morning, afternoon, and evening.